What's going on, everyone? So, we're going to go through this new patch that I made for Jar by Superheaven. It's a Helix patch, but I figured if you're not using Helix, or even if you are and you just want to see what I did, you just kind of give you an idea if you think you like the tones you're hearing and you just want to get in that ballpark. I'm going to show you what I did. So, this patch I named Tone in a Jar, fittingly, right? And the guitar I used for it was this Squire Classic Vibe 50 Strat with the lace sensor red, silver, blue pickups. Mostly on the bridge pickup, which is the red, but the blue in the neck is good for a couple of things here too. And then I'm in half step. A couple songs on the album are drop C sharps, just drop the low string, and we'll go through the whole thing. So I did 8 snapshots here. And the first one I just named Distortion. This is the main sound I got for the record. Just kind of. It doesn't sound entirely like full because of the low end I had to take out, but when you play it along with the record, it's right there. Again, keep in mind when you're mixing an album, a lot of the low end comes out of the guitar to make room for the bass, kick drum, things like that. So this isn't ideal for just playing by yourself all of the time. You may want to do something like tweak the EQ if you're just using this to jam, but if you're playing along to the record, it's going to be right there. Again, with anybody else's setup, different monitors, I'm playing through Rocket KRK5s that when I hear it in my headphones right now, and different pickups, you're going to have to adjust the taste, but this should get you pretty close. So the first thing we did here, and this is for the main distortion tone. Well, I guess I'll go through all the snapshots. So then there's a lead tone, which is exactly the same thing, but there's a reverb on it. So that's going to be for like some of the, any of the little solo-y leads that Superheaven likes to do. There's not a ton of like guitar solos, but there are a lot of like little mini solo lead things, and that little extra reverb just gives it some room there to kind of breathe and be a little wide. So then I have phaser. This is obviously for the bridge in Jar. That just kind of is this part. But you can also throw it on some other parts. It's pretty cool. Clean. Now this isn't entirely clean, but this is the clean for like the stuff that they do. So there's a few different parts, but the main one people will probably hear is in on it. So you might want to pick a little lighter. You could use this for hole in the ground too. Like neck pickup will clean it up a lot. And obviously you want to pick a little lighter probably. So yeah, that's just kind of your base for the clean. So this YD intro is going to be Youngest Daughter intro. It's going to be clean with a flange. Pretty self-explanatory, and then obviously it's not just in the intro, it comes back again. Daughter is the main fuzz tone, and I'm going to talk a lot about this one because fuzz is hard to dial in here, but this is kind of your kind of just the basically any distorted parts in Youngest Daughter. And then there's 2 more slots. I just put these 2 there. You can use them for whatever you want. I put clean verb. This is just the reverb on the clean setting. Whatever. Just something, to use. Same with the phase, clean phase. Okay. So that's what we got here. I'm going to go through each one and kind of show you what I did. So let's dive into it. So distortion, okay. There's not a lot of room to name the snapshots, so this is kind of your main rhythm tone for the record. My starting point here actually is kind of the cab, but I'll go through everything that's here. So first and foremost, I have this LA Studio comp, and I didn't mess with it too much. It's on a compressor. I might have put a little bit more on the emphasis there at 1.8 and the gain up at 1.4. Again, this is just kind of more of a feel thing because when you're playing into a modeler like Helix, you're going to want to have it feel a little bit more natural, like you're playing into an amp, the way it compresses, and there's all kind of things with this, the science behind like audio and sonics, and it's just like the room you're playing in, all that kind of stuff. There's just a feel thing, and it squashes it a little bit, so it makes it kind of have a different quality. So this is with it on, and then you turn it off. Not very different. It gives it a little bit of a spark. It's almost like a boost in a way, but I can feel it in my picking. And then noise gate stock settings. Again, this is just to kill off the unwanted hiss and noise. You can't really hear it, but I also have a noise gate on in my DAW because of using a microphone while I'm doing this. So you're not going to hear the the noise gate feature on here, but if you turn it off, you'll get the feedback. Okay, and then there's really only 4 other things on for this patch. There's a distortion patch, an amp, a cab, which is 2 cabs, and then an EQ. The distortion I ended up using is not one of the rats. It's actually the Minotaur, which is a Klon. And when you get a Klon's gain knob, any kind, I mean, like, people love to talk about the $5,000 plus whatever they're going for now, $8,000 real Klons. I've had a few different ones. I have a Conspiracy Theory now. I had a Sugar Drive. There's a bunch of good ones. Soul Food you can get for pretty cheap. They all are the same circuit and do the same thing. And the feature on this knob is once you hit that kind of 75%, it starts to have a certain breakup. So I have the gain at 8.4, which is almost 10 above 7.5, just to give it a certain kind of distortion quality to it. With the tone 7.1, level 9.2. Now this is actually after I dialed in the amp a little bit more, because I had these settings a little different. There's kind of a lot of mid-range here, and it doesn't sound exactly perfect by itself, again, without the rest of the album, but the bass takes up so much of the low end, and it has a really big rumble to it, and the bass is really important on this record. So there's kind of just like a nice, on the high end, it's not super smooth, there's a little bit of a fizz, but enough mid-range to make it sort of smooth when you're playing these individual notes. But the chords are real, you can kind of play fast, and there's no definition, but still kind of has that grindy, that kind of, it's that kind of rat style sound, distortion plus kind of. It's not a like a Boss distortion. It's not a straight amp distortion. It has this sort of kind of like snarl to it. So that's the Minotaur there I use for that. The amp I use here is the Huwatt 100, which is an old high watt mod. These heads are known for having this really like clean quality to them, and like a lot of headroom. You still make it break up here, but I didn't want it to be super distorted. That's why when you turn the distortion patch off for the clean setting, it kind of has this like it has like a sparkle to it. It's a little bit dirty, and the compressor is helping that. The amps, the cabinets I chose are helping that. The pickups definitely dictate that, but it has a lot of headroom, and so like a pedal going into it isn't just gonna make it so gross that it's like you can't hear any note definition, because some of these pedals into the amp heads, and this is with real amps and pedals and with mods, it's just going to be too much for what you're going for in this situation. So I have the drive at 4.3, so not even halfway. The bass stock setting on this is way up, like at 8. I have it way down to 3.8. Again, cutting some bass out because of the context of the mix. The bass in general probably should be less, but again, the mix has the bass and doing its thing. This is just for playing guitar. Mid 5.6, treble 5.8, so not far apart. Presence only at 3.5. I had it higher, and you may need to adjust that to taste. It just kind of depends on your situation and like what you're hearing it through. Channel volume 7.4, master 6. I had those higher and lower, and again, you might have to change that because it's going to dictate not just the breakup, but also like if you're playing it like into your computer and Spotify like I was, the volumes aren't always going to be the same. You'll have to mess with that, and you can do that in a lot of different ways. But I was trying to get it in a natural way with the amps, so it wasn't just like, oh, I'm cutting decibels off the cab output or whatever. But you can do that too. So that without the, well, this is for the distortion patch, so I guess I'll show you the clean after that. But that's kind of where it's at. The cabs. All right, so I wanted V30s, so I got a 412 Brit V30, which is like a Marshall 1960, just like, with vintage 30s in it. They were playing Avatar cabs, which had V30s in them, and I think they still do for Webwing. He was using it last time I saw them. Taylor was, at least. Jake was playing drums last time I saw them. But I've seen a lot of people use Avatar cabs, but I've never really played through one, so I'm not sure how the cab construction compares to like a Mesa or a Marshall, which I have owned and do own. But I just kind of went more with the Marshall because a lot of times in these programs, the Mesa that they model it after is the oversized Mesa cab, which I personally don't own those. I have two Mesa cabs that are the standard rectifier size. I really like how those sound. I have some friends who have the oversized ones. They still sound great, but they have a different kind of, the way the cab construction is so big, it's almost like more bassy. I want to say when I've played through it, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's a little different. So I went with that stock settings, but I using a, which is like a SM7B 7 dynamic, and then I have this 412 Greenback 25, which this is again kind of like a Marshall with greenbacks, different speaker setup. I have a 67 condenser on it. And I was just messing around with different V30, and the Greenback kind of combo has this kind of mid-rangey rock sound that has enough breakup, but it still sounds like really, like it's rock. It's not supposed to be like a metal tone here or like a really tight pop punk tone. So the kind of blend with the different mics got me where I wanted to be. Again, this is just guessing. I'm not trying to model exactly what Will Yip used to record them, and if you're playing through a real cab or something, like you're going to use what you have, and that's going to also mess with the settings. So this is just kind of what I went with. At the end of the chain, I have an EQ. Looks like I took a tiny bit off the low end. It's just simple EQ. I really was not even messing with it too much. This was just trying to push some mids, but really I ended up not using too much of it. I kind of included it in there for anybody who needs to adjust and wants to use the EQ instead of going in and messing with the amp settings. That's just kind of more or less for the sake of the upload. Sometimes I do use it a lot at the end, but again, you can use it per snapshot, like if you want to put some more of a frequency on the fuzz or something like that, but it's there if you need it. And I just went with the simple one. You can grab one of these other ones, but parametric can be really useful. I just didn't want to get too crazy. So yeah, so that's a straight up main rhythm tone. So then number 2 is lead. Again, this is exactly the same. It just has the reverb in the loop. And I use the hall reverb from the Legacy set because I wanted something a little bit bigger, but not like crazy cavernous. Kind of has a nice echo to it, but I kind of put the decay up a little bit, the mix up a little bit, didn't really mess with it too much. Sounds pretty good. Yeah, not much to explain there. Again, Jake is somebody who, I don't remember what pedal he used. I think it was some kind of reverb, not a delay. It might have been like a TC Electronics one or something. I can't recall. But I really did my research for this, right? But again, the studio stuff, totally different. There's like little leads in different songs. There's leads in Sponge, obviously. There's leads in like Outside of Me. There's just like these little like mini solos, and some of them might not really call for the reverb, but it's just a little boost. And you can actually, there's like a level, you can boost the level here if you don't want really to boost the mix and just have it bumped up a little bit so it gets a little louder. Not really the same as using like a straight boost pedal for that, like you would in a live setting for like a solo when you just want a little bit more heat on it, but it's useful there for that. Alright, phaser. This is really mostly for the bridge lead in Jar, Life in a Jar. put this in the loop too. It does affect how it sounds, and I didn't want it to be too like sludgy and muddy. Personally, in real life, I like my phase shifters and phasers like in the front because I like that kind of like new metal, like sludgy kind of sound you get. It's pretty interesting. I've used it on a ton of my own records, but for this, I thought it sounded a little bit better in the loop, just slightly cleaner the way that the actual solo is, or like lead, whatever it is. And you can use this on different parts too if you want to use it for little leads here and there. That is just, again, that's just the distortion setting with the phaser in the loop. And I use the script mod phase, which is like a MXR phase 90, rate at 1.9, mix at 50%, up 1 decibel. Again, that's just because it's coming in like a lead over the top of that kind of bridge riff. So, sounds pretty cool. Whatever. Because like sometimes you guys will hear me play like this riff. That's from one of my own band songs, Casualty. It's a Stolaway song. That's just like a good example of where I would use like a phase shifter and I put it through the front of the amp. So like even live I would do that. It has kind of this like, again, this sludgy, almost new metal type of sound. But I don't think it's really necessary here. For as much as this is supposed to have like kind of a grungy sound to it, it is really well produced. And that's a good thing. Okay, clean. So this is the same everything else from the distortion, except the distortion is actually turned off, so it's just the amp, the cab, your 2 dynamic patches here in the speakers, so, and then the EQ. So no settings changes. This is just what it sounds like without the Minotaur clon. Not super clean. Almost a little bluesy, kind of go fourth position. Whatever. But it kind of has that, a little bit of that heat on the, just the sparkle, sort of like high end. They don't use a lot of cleans on this album, so I think there's 3 or 4 different parts you can use this on. Really, it's not crazy, but I wanted to include it in there. And you can really clean up the amp if you want it to get clean, you know, like just for argument's sake. But it's not really necessary on this album, so it's kind of... I really like this tone, honestly. It's like a verse part. Kind of use it on some of their EP stuff almost. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I like this amp model a lot. Alright, so then the back half. So there's really 2 of them you actually need, and then 2 for youngest daughter, and then, or the 2 of them you actually need are the 2 for youngest daughter. The other 2 are just kind of placeholders. So youngest daughter intro is exactly the same thing with the clean, but there's a flanger, and it's in the front of the amp here. That's pretty sick. This is a gray flanger, which is supposed to be like an MXR flanger, like what Eddie Van Halen would use, and what his EVH one is basically without the stripes and the 1 button. I have the rate at 3.5 here. You don't want it to be too fast, or otherwise it's going to start sounding weird, because you want kind of that subtle jet plane, like it's like a tape flange, like when people used to mix to 1/2-inch tape and get that really cool effect, but it's hard to do with some of these pedals. With 6.2 manual 8.4, that's kind of important for how I got it there. Yeah, I mean nothing too crazy. Mix I do have up at 59%, and then I have the headroom all the way down at -6.8 dBs, and that's just to get that kind of sound, so it's not almost chorusy and like kind of that weird, like it sounds cheap, like a cheap pedal. Like you want it to have like more of a natural sound. Again, tape flange. It doesn't really have, but you know, it's more in the ballpark of what the album sounds like than some of the flanger sound stock. You definitely hear it there, but it's not real over the top. And you can use that on different parts. Okay. So then, youngest daughter is a fuzz, and we're going to talk about this here. So I ended up going with the legacy fuzz Pi instead of any of the actual like newer models, and there's a reason, but this is kind of what it sounds like. Fuzz is hard to get right. If I'm not using Helix, I'm probably going to use one of my fuzz pedals. I have a bunch sitting over here that I like for this kind of sound. One I don't have anymore that I should is a Swollen Pickle, which I think they were actually using the Swollen Pickles live when they were touring this album. It's an awesome pedal. I mean, it has enough low end so it doesn't sound like a really like snarly, like high end, ugly fuzz, but it's not like too boomy to where you can't pick out the notes. It's really great. I might have preferred like a Russian green muff here, which like if I was using a real pedal. The green muff in Helix is, I like it. I mean, Helix fuzzes are not the best. You really have to mess with them, but it's almost like too much low end. So I just ended up going through all the different fuzzes and went with this one because it had the most. I had the most like EQ control without adding more EQs to the actual patch. So I have here drive at 51%. It's hard to, you may have to adjust this because the record, it's again the bass does so much of the work. The bass I have at 53 because with these pedals, if you start taking too much bass out, they sound really like fizzy and just tin canny and not good. Mid all the way at 71 for the same reason. Treble down at 14 for the same reason. Again, I wanted to control over this EQ. Output at 90%, and it's still almost kind of quiet, but and some of this is my pickups and the amp. I didn't want to make a separate patch for this fuzz because I don't think it's necessary if you just want to play along to the record with one patch. But I don't know. It's hard to get right. I think I have just enough high end on this to where it doesn't sound too dull and muddy and flat, but it has that kind of like sizzle, but it doesn't sound so sharp that you just like ugly. And then, you know, I forgot to play it. I should go watch my own lessons. But that picked out part, whatever it is, you could do that here and it sounds pretty close. When you learn enough songs and then don't practice them, sometimes it's hard to get them back to you right away. Sorry. Yeah, so that's your fuzz. That's the daughter patch. So then clean verb is like literally the clean with the reverb. It's nothing different than the distortion with the reverb, just no distortion pedal. Kind of not really for Superheaven, but whatever. You can do whatever you want with that one. Clean phase, same thing. Phaser with the clean. You know, whatever. I didn't really want to go through every song and be like, this is the distortion for this song. Like, you could do like a lo-fi intro if you wanted to for Sponge, but it's not really that lo-fi. It's just kind of everything comes in. This record is probably stacked with layers of tracks with different pedals. There's probably some that have rats on them, distortion plus, probably some full tone stuff. I mean, it's hard for me to really know. A lot of older, like 80s, 90s, like vintage stuff. But this is just kind of a general a general overview, a general patch that you can use to jam along and get maybe a starting point if you're new to dialing in Helix, or maybe didn't know where to start and thought this sounded okay. Or even if you don't use Helix, this is kind of to show you just the ballpark I was in for where I thought these tones should sit if you're just playing as one guitar player jamming along to the record. You know, like... And then I thought there was enough kind of spit on this to... enough dirt to just kind of do all those like little fill parts they do. If you have hot enough pickups, I guess. Yeah. So that's just kind of a quick explanation. This patch is for free up on Helix custom tone, line 6 custom tone. Sorry, it's a Helix native patch, but I think you can use it for any of your stuff. It's not that crazy. I use Helix native 90% of the time, and the other 10% of the time Helix LT, because I didn't want to pay for the scribble strips because my eyes are really bad in the dark. I wouldn't be able to read them on stage, and I've used it on stage, and the colors do fine for me. But I know that I have the DSP to do some of this stuff, so if you guys are using some of the smaller stuff too, that's why I wanted to walk through this. Like, all of them are great, but I just don't know what the DSP will allow on the ones I don't own. But yeah, this is just kind of like a basic overview of this patch. It's for free. It's under the name Tone in a Jar by Mill182 is my name on there. And I put the band as like Superheaven / Daylight, formerly Daylight, and I tried to put as much info as I could. So hope you enjoy it, and hopefully it works out for you. And let me know what other kind of videos like this you're looking for. All right, peace.